When you first retire, it can feel like you've finally crossed the finish line. You've spent decades saving and investing, and now it's time to start using that money. But the decisions that you make in the first 5 years of retirement can have an outsized impact on the next 20 or 30 years or more. And how much you withdraw, which accounts you pull from, when to claim Social Security, how you manage taxes, and even how your portfolio is positioned can all have long-term consequences. So today, I want to walk you through why those first 5 years matter so much and some of the biggest decisions that you'll want to get right during those first 5 years. But first, my name is Justin Haywood. I'm a certified financial planner professional, and I've helped hundreds of retirees make good decisions in retirement, and I want to help you do the same. So there are a lot of reasons why these first 5 years are so important. And in a little bit, we'll look at some things that you can actually do during the first 5 years to put yourself in a better position. But first, let's look at why they're so important. The first reason is what's often called sequence of returns risk. So the idea behind sequence of returns risk is that two portfolios that have the exact same return, say 8% return over a 30-year period, the way those returns are structured is extremely important in terms of the long-term viability of your plan. So let's say that one portfolio has 5 really good years early on in retirement, and you had a $2 million portfolio, and that portfolio goes up from 2 million to 2.6 million during the first 5 years. You're going to be in a much better position in the following 25 years or so because you had those early strong returns. Now, on the contrary, let's say that your portfolio went down during the first 5 years of retirement. Let's say it went down from 2 million down to 1.5 million. Well, now you're going to be withdrawing at a lower amount. And even if you have stronger returns later on in retirement than the first portfolio, you're going to end up with a much worse result because of the fact that you had those bad returns early on. And so this is what we call sequence of returns risk. And that's one thing that's really important during those first 5 years is making sure that your portfolio is set up in a way, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to be able to weather any sort of market downturn early on. Another reason the first 5 years are so important is that large purchases tend to occur early on in retirement. Things like new cars, a boat, campers, RVs, large purchases that you've been putting off for a long time, a lot of times can show up early on in retirement. And that's fine, but you want to have a plan for where that money is going to be pulled from. And it kind of has the same effect as sequence of returns risk because you're pulling money out of the portfolio early on in retirement. So you just want to have a plan and make sure that the long-term success of your plan can be sustained with those large purchases. A lot of people also like to relocate. They might want to move out of state. They may want to downsize or even upsize their home. And so knowing how this is all going to affect your plan over the next 25, 30 years is really important. Also, getting your spending habits right. Before you retire, you might have an idea of what you want to spend. You might want to spend $20,000 a year on travel or $10,000 a month. You have these ideas of what you want to spend, but until you actually get to retirement, you may not know what that's going to look like. So periodically checking in on that, making sure that you're still on track is really important during that first 5 years of retirement. And finally, the first 5 years of retirement are really important for developing a tax strategy that's going to make a big difference in how much tax that you pay over time and how you coordinate Roth conversions, Social Security timing, pensions, all of these sort of things is vital for having a tax strategy that doesn't leave you paying more than your fair share of taxes. And we'll look at that in a little while as well. So those are the reasons that the first 5 years of retirement are so important. But now let's look at what you can actually do to make those first 5 years as fruitful as possible. So the first thing that you can do to make sure that the first 5 years are as fruitful as possible is have a withdrawal strategy before you retire. So let's say you've accumulated money in 401ks, Roth IRAs, taxable accounts, regular savings. When you retire, your income's going to stop, and now you're going to need to figure out where you're going to pull your money from. So before you retire, you want to know going into that first month of retirement, where's that next paycheck going to come from? It's not going to come from your employer. So you've got to find out where that money is going to come from. So that can be savings. It can be a 401k withdrawal. It's up to you. And there are better and worse strategies, but you need to know where that money is going to come from, especially when you're coordinating that with things like we talked about earlier with large purchases. Let's say you're going to buy a new $50,000 car, are you going to finance it? Or are you going to pull that from your 401k? You're going to pull it from savings. So you want to know where your withdrawals are going to come from before you retire. And during those first 5 years, you really want to get that right. You don't want to pull from the wrong place for the first 5 years and put yourself behind the 8 ball later in retirement because you didn't get these decisions right. The second thing that you want to do is take advantage of your early retirement tax window. And I want to illustrate with an example here of some clients that are in their early 50s. This is Lisa and Frank. Lisa's 53 and Frank's 52, and they've done a great job saving. They did receive some inheritance, which has really helped get them a little bit ahead. And Frank wants to retire in a couple of years. So he's 52 now, but he wants to retire at 54. They want to spend $10,000 per month during retirement, and they want to spend $25,000 additional on vacations every year. And they also want to buy a new car, $50,000 car, each of them. And they want to buy a new car until they're in their mid 70s. They want to buy a new car every 7 years. So we have these purchases kind of mapped out in their plan, and they've accumulated about $5 million. He has about $2.4 million in his current 401k. They've got a joint brokerage account with about 1.6, and they've got some traditional and Roth IRAs. Their house is paid off, and they've got about $80,000 in the bank. So they're in a good position to retire early, but they do need to be strategic. And so the biggest thing that we're looking at with Lisa and Frank is that early retirement tax window. And so what we're looking at for them is once Frank retires at 54, this is Frank's retirement year, we're going to begin a series of Roth conversions for them that's going to move money from their traditional retirement assets over into their Roth. And we're going to continue this strategy really for the first 10 years or so until they begin taking their Social Security. And ultimately, what that's going to do when we look at this over time is enable them to pay about $1.3 million less tax across their lifetime. And that's going to result in about $3 million more of what we call tax adjusted ending assets. So now if they were to skip out on this and miss those first 5 years, they're not going to be in quite as good a position. They'd probably still be okay, but it would just be a lot less efficient. So that's what getting those first 5 years right looks like and the impact that it can have on your retirement. So that's the importance of getting your tax strategy right early. It can have a really big impact. Now, we talked earlier about your portfolio and sequence of returns risk. So I want to look at that here for just a minute. So early on, again, if you have bad returns in retirement, it can really tank the long-term success of your plan. And so we want to look at, for Lisa and Frank, what would it look like for them to have a conservative portfolio, a moderate portfolio, and an aggressive portfolio, and look at what an early market decline might do. So let's look at their plan here again. So let's look at their current aggressive portfolio. Now, what this illustrates here is we're really just going to look at this blue bar. This is illustrating what would happen if the market dropped by 40% immediately. In their aggressive portfolio, if the market dropped by 40%, their plan success goes all the way down from about 70% to about 36%. That would seriously jeopardize their plan. They might need to make some changes to the amount of spending that they are maintaining on a monthly basis. They might have to change their travel plans. That means their portfolio would be going down into the neighborhood of about $3 million from about $5 million. So that would obviously jeopardize their plan if they were trying to spend $10,000 a month and travel at the level they were traveling and buy a new car every 7 years. They might want to look at scaling back on their portfolio risk. So let's look at if they went from an aggressive to a conservative portfolio, something that's obviously not going to get quite so much growth, but it has a lot more protection built in. So let's say in the same scenario, there was a market drop by 40%. Now, instead of dropping from a 70% chance of success, they drop to about a 50.5% chance of success. So that's certainly a lot better than 36%. So it looks like for them, one thing that they might want to do is switch from something more aggressive to something a little bit more protective, kind of splitting the difference here, looking at a moderate portfolio. That's going to be kind of somewhere in the middle. So that would take them down to about a 46% chance of success, meaning there's still a 46% chance they won't run out of money and a 54% chance that they would run out of money at some point in their lifetime. So if this sounds like where you are, maybe you're getting ready to retire, or you're in the first couple of years of retirement and you're not quite sure if everything's going according to plan, I'd love to talk with you. You can click the link in the description below to schedule a call with me. And during that call, we can explore what your situation looks like and how we might be able to help you at Haywood Wealth Management make better decisions moving forward. So click the link in the description to schedule a call with me. I'd love to talk. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel. That way you can see more of my content in the future, and it'll help other people just like you find their way to my content as well. And if you're looking for another video to watch this one right here.